Hey guys, this is the Mind of Lilith, and thank you for joining me today for a quick astrological analysis of Whitney Houston's relationship with her mother, Sissy Houston. I was supposed to be uploading this on Whitney's birthday, but so many things have happened in my personal life that I really didn't have the time, but here I am now. Okay. Whitney was born on August 9th, 1963 at 8:55 p.m. and her mother, Sissy Houston, was born on September 30th, 1933. I don't have her birth time. I'm getting this information from astrotheme.com. They're supposed to be a great source of reference for birth chart information. So I was interested in this topic because a lot of people have alluded to the fact that perhaps Whitney wasn't Sissy's daughter for real. I've heard Teresa Graves was actually her mother. I've also heard that Whitney's mother was jealous of Whitney. Sissy was jealous of Whitney for whatever reason. I also heard that Whitney was physically abused a lot as a child, which may have attributed to her self-esteem issues and her issues when it comes to drugs and substance abuse, right? So I'm going to look at some aspects of the chart. It's not going to be a full analysis, but I'm going to look at the moon sign and planet and placement. I'm going to look at Mars, Saturn, and Pluto. Mars for impatience, physical violence, aggressiveness, and competitiveness. Saturn for oppression, restriction, limitation, and discipline. And Pluto for control, manipulation, betrayal, and hidden motives, right? I'm going to look at all of those planets in Whitney's chart and see how they're connected to her mother's chart, okay? So Whitney Houston, she has the Sun in Leo, Moon in Aries, Mercury in Virgo, Venus in Leo, Mars in Libra, Jupiter in Aries, Saturn in Aquarius, Uranus in Virgo, Neptune in Scorpio, and Pluto in Virgo. Whitney has an ascendant in Pisces, which would mean that Virgo will be her 7th house from her ascendant, okay? Whitney's mother has Sun in Libra, Moon in Aquarius, Mercury in Libra, Venus in Scorpio, Mars in Scorpio, Jupiter in Libra, Saturn in Aquarius, Uranus in Aries, Neptune in Virgo, and Pluto in Cancer. So when I do synastry readings, I don't just look at the interplay of the planets or the interaction of the planets between the two people. I look at the natal chart as well to give me some insight on how a person's behavior may have affected their relationship with the other person, or their partner, their child, or whoever, right? So, looking at Sissy's chart, I see this notorious Mars square Saturn aspect. Now, in the equal house system, this would be a square, but in the Placidus house system, it's not a square. It's an elemental square, but it's not a square by degree. But it is still significant to me, right? Because it would give us some insight into how Sissy used her Martian energy to assert authority over other people, right? And with the square aspect, this would be abusive, oppressive, unrelenting, easily triggered. There's no forgiveness, there's no flexibility, there's no adaptability either. And her Mars is in 2 fixed signs, which means she's really rigid at the very least, okay? Now, if you look at the chart on the screen, you can see that Whitney has Mars in the 7th house. This is basically the house of open enemies. And with Mars here, you have a lot of enemies that want to use you or manipulate you or control you, especially when it comes to business and romantic relationships. We knew that Whitney had a lot of people around her trying to take money from her, trying to use her for money. She even had to deal with her own father suing her for money because he was her business partner at some point, or her manager. That is the 7th house. The 7th house is the house of romantic relationships or marriage, business partnerships, and open enemies, okay? Whitney also has Pluto in the 7th house. So Whitney has Mars and Pluto in her 7th house of business partnerships, of relationships and marriage, and of open enemies. This is really precarious. This is really dangerous. Very dangerous. Pluto in the 7th is having relationships with really powerful people who work for seedy organizations, who are really wealthy, really powerful and really dangerous, because Pluto deals with the underworld and the ways in which we basically extract power and resources from other people in ways they have no control over. In other words, Whitney had very powerful, rich people in her life that were determined to take her money from her, that were determined to control her, to have access to her money. Why do I say money? Because Pluto is the planet of other people's resources. It rules Scorpio. It's the co-ruler of Scorpio, which is the sign of other people's resources. And Pluto is about an exchange of energy, extraction of energy, checks and balances, painful transformation and crises as it relates to the things that we value, right? With Pluto in the 7th in the house of business partnerships and marriage, those are both financial relationships. Okay, a marriage is a financial partnership, and so is a business. So with Pluto being here, she was in danger of being betrayed by people for her money, in my opinion. What's interesting to me is that her mother's son is in this house. Whitney's mother's son, Sissy Houston's son, is in the same house as Whitney's Mars and Pluto. At the very least, this means that her mother was a very powerful, wealthy woman, or she had ties to really powerful, wealthy people that Whitney had no idea about. Now, why would I say no idea? And it was beyond Whitney's control. Now, why do I say that? Because Whitney's mother, Sissy Houston's Neptune, shares the same house as Whitney's Mars and Pluto, right? So we have Neptune and the Sun connected with Mars and Pluto as well. And Mercury's also here. Mercury deals with the exchange of money. With Pluto and Mercury in the same house, that is the extraction or the facilitation of the extraction of resources and money, right? Mercury rules the transference of energy, of information, of resources. Pluto mines for those things. It is the system that is put in place to extract those resources. And basically Mercury distributes these resources to others who have access to that house, right? Which in this case would be her mother, right? Because the sun is here, and whatever rich, powerful organizations and people that her mother was affiliated with. Pluto is a very karmic planet. It's a contract that was signed before you were born. These are things that happen beyond your control. This is your mother's karma or your father's karma. What is also really interesting is that John Houston, Whitney Houston's father, is also a Virgo. And so his son is in Whitney's 7th house, right? The same house as Pluto and Mars. Whitney had two very powerful parents who were probably affiliated or associated with some mobs and some gangs, because the music industry back in the day was affiliated with the mob, right? I mean, by now we've heard, Sam Cooke's story and how he was betrayed by the mob. A lot of black folks got in bed with the mob in the early 20th century, especially in the music industry, because they were the only ones who were giving loans to black entertainers, or they were the ones who owned the record labels. You need money to start a record label, and if you are an illegal immigrant from Italy, the only way you can do things is by illegal activity, right? Selling drugs, alcohol, and killing people or extorting money from people, the mob. So a lot of black people back in the day got in bed with the mob in order to get into entertainment. This is why there were so many tragic deaths and suicide in the black entertainment industry, and white as well, but disproportionately the black entertainment industry. Okay, so Whitney's father was a manager for musicians and artists back in the day. He was also affiliated, and Whitney said that he was a very powerful, influential man in the city of Newark. So he had ties to a lot of powerful people. That's Pluto. So Whitney's mother and father were affiliated. There was a contract, in my opinion, signed on Whitney before she even got here. She had an obligation and a duty to fulfill because her parents were both in the business. So you're going to follow in my footsteps, right? You don't really have a choice. I'm going to make you think you have a choice, but you don't really have a choice in the matter, right? I think that Sissy had a Svengali type relationship with Whitney because, with Neptune in the 7th, Whitney did not have a clear idea of who her mother was. So her mother had the power and the influence to groom and condition Whitney in a way that she wanted to be conditioned, right? However she wanted, in my opinion, okay? So when I look for aspects between mother and child, I look for oppositions or conjunctions to the sun, moon, or ascendant. Whitney's mother's sun is in Libra, and so Whitney's moon is in Aries. So there's an opposition there as far as element and sign, right? With the opposition, there's a strong bond. So these two people understood each other, and there was some sort of soul recognition here. However, Sissy's Mars, which is aggression and passion and energy and selfishness, is square Whitney's sun. So the way that Sissy asserted herself may have clashed with who Whitney thought she was, right? It may have clashed with her ego. She may have felt like she was being controlled psychologically by her mother, but she had no choice but to follow because her mother's a really powerful, strong, wealthy, well-connected woman who could give her access to an industry that pays really well, right? Modeling and entertainment, and she can sing, all this stuff. You know, you would think you want that. I want to be famous. I want to be rich. I want to have money. I want to sing, right? So Whitney probably thought, yeah, this is what I really want to do. But I think her mother groomed her for that, for her financial benefit. Now, why would I say this? I'm not saying that Sissy was broke. You know, Sissy's family was already well established in the music industry before Whitney was born, right? They had a lot of connections. But as you can see, Sissy's Jupiter is in Whitney's 7th house of business partnerships, open enemies. And it's where the Mars, Pluto, and Mercury is. This is money, right? I mean, everybody knows that Whitney was a golden goose of the family. She was beautiful, she was photogenic, and she was extremely talented, right? I'm surprised that Sissy Houston doesn't get the momager moniker like Kris Jenner does. This is a momager aspect, especially with Sissy's Saturn square or opposing Whitney's sun. This is somebody who's really controlling and dominating over their partner. This is somebody who is miserable or makes a person feel miserable, or just who's very disciplinarian. There's no fun, there's no love, there's no warmth. It's just duty. I'm doing this out of duty. I'm your mother. You know, there's no hugs, no kisses, just duty, right? I'm doing my job here, and you have a job to fulfill as well. You have a role to fulfill in this family, and you're going to do it, period. Especially with Sissy's Pluto square her sun by element, or if it's in the equal house system, it will be square her sun, but it's a square element, right? And then Pluto square Mercury, this is somebody who's really manipulative and controlling when it comes to their communication. This is a Svengali, and I'm talking about Sissy's chart. Pluto square Mercury is somebody who can get you to think what they want you to think, and then you believe it was your idea when it actually wasn't. It is also very interesting that Sissy's Pluto is square Whitney Houston's moon. Pluto is control, manipulation, betrayal, hidden agendas, right? Scorpio stuff. Whitney's moon is in Aries. A Pluto square moon aspect is emotional betrayal, or relationship that's based on hidden agendas. This is emotional abuse, emotional neglect of family secrets that are oppressive, that are abusive, that are painful, that put the child's life or emotional security at risk. Whitney did not have a good relationship with her mother. Based on what I'm seeing in this chart, this relationship was like business, okay? And, you know, it would give some credence to some of the claims that Whitney was adopted from another woman. I don't know if that's true or not, but at the very least, this relationship was abusive, emotionally abusive at the very least, right? And with Mars square the sun, it was probably really physically abusive too. There was a lack of patience here. And Whitney being a Pisces ascendant, she needed some comfort. She's very sensitive, extremely sensitive, not just emotionally, but psychically as well. Very, very sensitive. So if she can sense that someone doesn't like her for some reason, she's going to carry that within her for her whole life. And she will treat herself as if she's being abused or she's something to throw away, right? Pisces have a tendency to throw themselves away for other people, especially when they're not in their power, when they're insecure, when they're sad, when they feel abandoned or lonely. They will drink themselves to death. They will destroy themselves because they feel like nobody cares about them anyway. And I think that could have attributed to Whitney's drug abuse problem. The escapism, needing to feel better or to feel good or to feel confident. There was anxiety. She was plagued by anxiety too. I think it's also interesting again that Whitney's Mars is in the same sign as her mother's sun and it's opposing her moon. There's a Mars opposite moon aspect here. Whitney may have had a bad temper or a short temper, or she may have been emotionally unstable because of the way that she was raised, in a sense. Her mother may not have been consistent with giving her nurturing, guidance, love, affirmation, support. The relationship was very rigid and business oriented. Well, maybe not just business, there was just duty. Like, I'm doing this because it's my job. Not that I really want to do it, but I have to do it. This girl serves a purpose. What I do find interesting also is that Whitney's Mercury is in her 7th house of open enemies. And, her Mercury is there. So that's a sibling. I believe her younger brother, Michael, got her hooked on drugs. He admitted this, that he was the first one to expose Whitney to cocaine. I'm not saying he did it maliciously, but a sibling kind of set her up for a lifetime of addiction in a sense. And there were rumors that one of Whitney's relatives sexually abused her too. So here we have Whitney, who's being emotionally and physically abused. Even psychologically abused, of course, because if you have those two, you're going to have psychological abuse also. Emotional, physical, and let me see, there's verbal abuse here too. I don't see as much verbal abuse, but there's verbal deception, lying. Sissy Houston's Neptune is on Whitney's Mercury, which is communication. This is Svengali. This is brainwashing. This is mind control. This is selling somebody a dream and a fantasy and getting them to buy into your dream and making them believe that is yours. This is communication and thinking. I don't like Neptune conjunctions or oppositions or squares. Conjunctions are not all bad because sometimes we do need fantasy and we do need softness and forgiveness in relationships. But in this particular instance, Sissy Houston used her language or her relationship or her power or something about her. She used that to control Whitney's mind, and Whitney did not see that her mother was not an ally to her. I'm not seeing allyship here. I'm seeing usury. I'm seeing abuse. I'm seeing duty and obligation, and I'm seeing an extraction of resources. That's what I'm seeing. I'm not seeing love in this chart like that, especially since Sissy's Venus is square Whitney's Venus, especially since Sissy's Mars is square Whitney's Venus, right? It's a wide orb, really wide, but in the equal house system, this will be a square, okay? And Mars square Venus is jealousy. Mars square Venus is jealousy, right? Because Mars is competition and Venus is beauty and harmony and balance. And Mars does not like to lose. It doesn't like to be shown up. A Mars and Scorpio person can become really jealous, really greedy, hoarding. Venus conjunct Mars is a woman who is potentially competitive against other women, or she's very masculine, right, and dominant and controlling, especially when Saturn is involved in this square in between. It's not in between, it's connected to it. They're communicating with each other, but it's not an exact square. Okay, but this is still significant because that Saturn energy is clashing with the Mars energy. The way that Sissy Houston asserts her control and domination of others is abusive, it's oppressive, it's restrictive. What's also very, very telling is that Whitney Houston has a Chiron on her ascendant. She was in a whole lot of pain because of something that was beyond her control that happened to her. Chiron is in Whitney's 8th house from her sun. The 8th house is the house of sexuality, okay? It's the house of secrets. It's the house of other people's resources and painful transformation. Chiron in the 8th would indicate sexual abuse to some extent, which would cause self-esteem issues and insecurities about your identity, about your personality, about who you think you are and how people perceived you. There were some, rumors about Whitney being bisexual. Why would she be ashamed of that? There's some pain or shame connected with her sexuality, right? And if I look at Sissy Houston's chart, I'm going to see if there are any square aspects. Sissy Houston's Chiron is square her daughter's ascendant. That's the 4th house. That's the mother house. Like, oh no, she hurt her daughter bad. I don't know exactly what happened, but there's a lot of pain here between mother and daughter. And I don't think her daughter had the strength or the knowledge of how to deal with that, because Whitney is Neptunian and her mother's Neptune was in her 7th house. And it was opposite her ascendant. So she probably saw her mother as something that she was not. Neptune in the 7th is also a mother who is creative, who is an actress, a performer. Does it surprise me that the Neptune and the sun of Sissy Houston is in Whitney's 7th house? So the reason why I look at the 7th house when it comes to synastry and parents is that the first relationship a child has is with the parent. So the 7th house is how you find out who you are, how your personalities develop, how you establish your identity, who you think you are relative to the world based on the way that your parents have conditioned you. So I look at the 7th house here, and Whitney's 7th house has so much energy, like Sissy Houston's Mercury, Sun, Jupiter, and Neptune are in her 7th house. Let me see if it's... Sissy Houston's Pluto is in Whitney's 5th house of creativity, of romance, of children. And we know that Bobby Christina has passed away. Whitney, her son is in Leo. That is the ruler of the 5th house. Whitney's death was connected to her mother's association with these powerful people. There's Plutonian themes all over this chart. The 5th house is the house of creativity and expression, what you produce as a result of your creativity, right? It's also sex and children. It is the creation of children as well, okay? For Sissy's Pluto to be here, again, there was an underworld connection or a strong and powerful and secretive connection with Sissy's Pluto, her power dynamics, who she was associated with, who she was affiliated with, and Whitney's creativity, her children, and what she produced as a singer, her masters, her estate, her catalog. That would be her 5th house, even though it's the 8th house now because it's a estate and she's passed away. It was produced in her 5th house. That's her creative output. So with Pluto being here, her death is connected to that. Especially with Pluto in the 7th house, that's death at the hands of another person, by and large. Especially with Mars in the same goddamn house. I'm not doing a progressed reading of this at this point. I'm just looking at the natal alignments. The progressed chart will give us some more insight as far as how the planets were aligned the day that she passed away. Okay, but her mother, whoever her mother was affiliated with that got her put on the industry, whatever organization, whoever she was dealing with that was really powerful and well connected to the underworld with Mars and Pluto together. If it was just Pluto by itself, I could say, okay, something else was going on, but Mars is there too. That's violence. That is murder. Okay. Now I talked about Whitney Houston's own Mars being in her 7th house. I didn't talk about Sissy Houston's placement of Mars in Whitney's house. Sissy Houston's Mars is in Whitney's 8th house. That's murder. I'm not saying that Sissy did anything. She didn't do that. I don't think she did it herself physically. But I think whoever she had connections to could have been responsible for her daughter's passing. I'm not saying this as a certainty, but when someone else's Mars is in your 8th house, they're dangerous to you. You're not safe around them for the most part. It's not always the case. But Mars in the 8th, that's the planet of violence in the house of death and transformation and endings. Like I said, it's not always the case. It's not a definite, but Whitney's Pluto is in her own 7th house where her mom's sun is too. I'm saying that for this particular instance with the other themes that are happening in their chart, right? As I mentioned earlier, the 8th house is also the house of other people's resources. Mars being here is like somebody who's greedy for someone else's money. It belongs to me. It is mine. I have ownership of it. This is great for business if you are business partners. But if things go left, they get really nasty really fast. And I think at some point, Whitney began to feel the pressure of having to be sort of like the breadwinner for the family, because Sissy had retired at some point. She wasn't singing as much anymore. And she was like the financial provider for a whole clan of people. Her siblings, relatives, parents, aunts, uncles. It's just everybody was in her pocket. That's Mars in the 8th. And Sissy may have forged a relationship with Whitney and made her feel like you owe me something, right? Or you're obligated to take care of your family the way that we've taken care of you. This is your job, okay? This is somebody putting another person in danger for the purpose of getting their resources from them. I don't like this aspect for a mother-child relationship at all, especially if the mother or one of the parties can benefit financially from the death of another. But this is not always a bad aspect, right? It's not always negative. But for this case, and we know how Whitney passed away, I'm kind of doing a retrospective here. We can see that her mother's Mars is in her 8th house. And then we have an 8th house planet in Whitney's 7th house, right? And then we have her mother's sun in Whitney's 7th house with an 8th house planet, right? And so Mars is also 8th house in Whitney's 7th house too. So Whitney has 2 8th house planets in her 7th house, and then her mother's Mars is in her 8th house as well. This is not a coincidence, and it's not a coincidence that many people think that Sissy had some resentment or jealousy of her daughter, or that she wasn't her mother, or didn't treat her as if she were her daughter. She treated her as if she were a business proposition. I would need to get Teresa Graves' birth chart and see her ascendant sign to figure out if Whitney was actually her daughter, because you can find some connection with that with the other person's natal chart too. I don't have that information. I have a birth date, but I don't have a birth time. And in this instance, that will be important because the birth time can give us an idea or a better idea of her connection with Whitney, right? So yeah, I'm going to leave it there. In conclusion, Whitney did not have a good relationship with her mother. Her relationship with her mother was strained, potentially abusive, painful, limiting, restrictive, and it's business. It was business. And Whitney did not see things clearly because her mother's Neptune was on her Mercury opposite her ascendant. So she didn't see things. She didn't see her mom clearly. It was like her mother was revered as a spiritual person because her mother was, in the church heavy. Neptune is also religion and spirituality, right? And this is also arts and singing and music. So her mother had this, fog around her of being this religious, exalted woman to be praised. All the while, she's manipulating her daughter and controlling her daughter's money and creating situations for her daughter to be used by people in the industry. This was set up before she was even born because Whitney was born into a really powerful, wealthy family, or a family that had ties to really powerful, wealthy people who were affiliated with the mafia, because Mars is next to Pluto in the 7th, period. Alright guys, I'm going to leave it there. If you want to order your own astrology or tarot reading, you can go to mindoflilith.com, follow the instructions to complete the order form and submit payment. I'm now accepting payments via Stripe, so you don't have to send me a CashApp if you don't want to. You can use Stripe to put in your credit card information and have the fees deducted from your account that way, okay? My account is SSL secured, so it's safe to submit your credit card information into the website, okay? I look forward to reading your comments. Please like, share, and subscribe, and I will have a live today discussing why I'm changing the content on my channel, because I was supposed to do it a couple days ago, but there's, again, this Mars in Taurus transit and Uranus square my Saturn. It's a hot mess. It's a bunch of things that are happening out of the blue that are making it difficult for me to do things the way that I want to do them. It's still going to get done anyway. Nothing's going to stop the show. It's just I can't be as consistent as I would like to be when it comes to putting up content for my channel, especially since I prioritize my readings for my customers, okay? All right, guys, again, I look forward to reading your comments. Please like, share, and subscribe, and I'll speak to you soon.